Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
Hey everybody, it's Aldo Gandhi, and I just want to let you know really quickly that our swag shop is reopened. DeepDishTees.com is where you go, and that's tees with T-E-E-S. Clever name, guys. They're the new home of our merchandise. You can get t-shirts, you can get caps, you can get coffee mugs, you can get hoodies, you can get all sorts of good stuff, and you'll help out the bar room with the purchase. So head over to DeepDishTees.com. Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Greg Gabriel Talks Football. I am Aldo Gandia. That handsome gentleman beside me is Greg Gabriel. Greg, how are you?
That bald-headed guy?
I'm joining you. I'm close. I'm getting there.
Oh, come on, man. If I had that, I'd be jumping for joy.
Greg,
I started losing my hair when I was 22.
Oh, my goodness. That's football for you, right?
Maybe it's from wearing a helmet too much because I started playing football when I was 8.
Oh, my goodness. 8 years old. We're going to have to get into that maybe later in the show. I'd love to hear some 8-year-old highlights of Greg Gabriel's football career. But the lead story right now is the fact that the Chicago Bears are expected to announce the hiring of Ryan, I can't even Poles. This is last night at 11 o'clock on Twitter. A real estate agent was at O'Hare Airport, and he captured this video of George McCaskey and Ryan Poles walking down the terminal. And then earlier this morning, we got the tweet from Adam Schefter saying the Bears are finalizing a deal to hire Chiefs Assistant Director of Player Personnel Ryan Poles as their next general manager, per league sources. Greg, what are you hearing about Ryan Poles?
Everything I hear is good. You know, and it's funny because he's been in the league, I think, 10, 12 years. And he was the one candidate that I didn't know a lot about, but I kept hearing his name. And, you know, he was a finalist for the job in Carolina last year. And then a finalist with the Giants. And a finalist up in Minnesota. In fact, he was supposed to fly to Minnesota this afternoon. But that alone tells you something, that he's impressive in interviews. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're not going to make that final round of interviews. You knew this was a done deal when George picked him up at the airport.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, when have you ever seen an owner pick up anybody at the airport?
Yeah, that's not
okay. You send. I know when I flew in, they sent a limo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then they had the guy holding the sign. It said Gabriel. Well, he was holding the sign. It said Canandaigua because that's where he's from, which, by the way, isn't far from Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
So. You know, I think that told you something. Know what I like about that too? George has got tennies and jeans on.
That's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, and if you know, George takes a lot of abuse from fans, but he's really a nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I worked there almost 10 years, got to know George well, and he's a very likable man.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, in reality, all the McCaskies are very likable people.
Yes, that's what I've heard.
Okay, so they're nice, warm, friendly people. And this just tells you a little bit about who he is right there in that tweet, that somebody was, you know, pretty much under control when they caught that one.
Yeah.
You know, so I'll tell you, the only thing I don't see is the kid doesn't have a big bag with him. So how long was he planning on staying? Unless they hadn't gotten the bag yet.
Yeah, interesting. They could be going to baggage claim, but yeah, he's not
Well,
carrying.
that is not a baggage claim right there.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
Come on, you've been to the airport. You can't go through the damn gate.
Yeah,
that's down a baggage claim.
Yes.
And the Bears got a contract with United, so they're going to fly everybody on United.
Yep, indeed. Indeed. So you're hearing good things about this guy, Ryan Poles. He's been a rising star in the Kansas City Chiefs organization. I actually pulled out his LinkedIn page and saw that he has been up until this hire, which according to Adam Hogue, it's not official yet. So he probably hasn't put pen to paper yet. They're probably talking about dollars and cents, but his experience with the Chiefs, executive director of player personnel, prior to that, the assistant director of player personnel, and that was in 2018 and 2021. In June, he was promoted to executive director. Prior to that, he was director of college scouting for a couple of years, and then the college scouting coordinator and scouting assistant. So after he left Boston College, where he was a part of the recruiting department there, he went over to the Kansas City Chiefs and has risen up the ladder quickly. He's also a former Chicago Bear in that he was signed as an undrafted free agent. Didn't make the team, but he's got.
No, he was in camp, and Rex Hogan was covering the East Coast back then, and Rex is the one who had the good grade on him. I saw him play twice because he was in the same class with Matt Ryan.
Yeah, in fact, I have a picture of him blocking for Matt Ryan there on the right. His high school pictures over there on the left. He looks like a huge guy, 6'4".
Yeah, but I gotta tell you, so I he worked with Ballard and at Kansas City for 3 years before Ballard went to the Colts.
Okay,
and so I had to get Ballard's opinion, and I got a few others. He said. Great person. We were together 2013 to 2016. Very smart, very organized. I said, yeah, but is he a strong evaluator? That's important. He said he's very good. He was on the road. He was a scouting coordinator when Chris was there, and then he was starting to go out on the road. Did a really good job. Chris said, he's extremely organized, has great leadership skills, and a great family. And I said, I don't remember much about him at training camp. I remember he was in training camp, but I don't remember a whole lot about him. And Chris said, he had skinny legs like your skinny ass legs.
That's great.
Of which I replied, fuck you.
Of course you did.
And
that's great. That is wonderful.
And then I talked to another guy and who I respect, who's been on the road with him, and said, he's very respectful and conscientious on the road. Been on the road with him a lot too, over the years, not one or two times. And he had one funny story, and there's this stuff. When scouts are on the road with each other, you get to know each other, you become friends, you can tease each other, but you always try to bust their balls a little bit too, and so Ryan says to this one guy, they were at a game, it was an Iowa State game, and this guy was a little bit late. I don't want to mention his name. Was a little bit late getting to the game, and so he was coming, I think, from Wisconsin or something. So that's a pretty good haul from Madison to Ames, Iowa. But anyway, he says, Teddy, where you been? You're getting here late. So Teddy right away goes, I was up at Mankato State. They got a freaking tackle up there. You would believe it. So he's like, really? I don't have him on my list. And, and he's just feeding him stuff, all this stuff. And he's writing it down very judiciously. And then he goes, gotcha. So,
the world of scouting ball busting, huh?
Yeah.
I love it. So what You tweeted out an Adam Schefter tweet that Jim Caldwell, the former Detroit Lions and Colts head coach, is in the building for an interview today. Do you find that strange that, or is there anything to read into the fact that Poles is at House Hall today and Caldwell is there too? Is that perhaps a marriage being formed?
It could be. And here's what I'm thinking. Yesterday, and we were exchanging texts. So, I thought making calls that there was a probability it was going to be Morocco Brown and Matt Eberflus, however you say his name. And one of the reasons was because of they already had a connection, which can be important. And they worked together for 4 years and got a very strong working relationship. So, and Eberflus is a finalist.
Mm-hmm.
So now with Morocco out of the picture, this guy getting the job, where does that put Eberflus? Well, again, I'm throwing darts at the wall here, but I'm trying to think, what's the thinking going on? Mm-hmm. You've got a very, I was listening to the score too. They say, well, you got to let him make the hire. Don't forget, this is a 36-year-old man who until a few hours ago has never been a GM, mm-hmm. and never made a coaching hire or even been involved in a coaching interview in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you're going to put the future of a multi-billion-dollar corporation in the hands of somebody so inexperienced? My answer to that is no. Will he have input? Yes. Will it be his final say? I don't think so. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that because they got to get it right. And one of the things they got to get right is stability within the organization and accountability and those types of things come with strong people. Now, I think, Polian has a strong connection with Caldwell.
Mm-hmm.
I think Caldwell, I don't know if he's first or second, but I think him and Quinn are in the clubhouse fighting it out right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you went with age, you'd have to go with Quinn because he's going to win. But they both got head coaching experience. They've had success as head coaches. They've put together strong staffs.
Mm-hmm.
So that experience combined with the inexperience of Ryan Poles, I think that kind of goes hand in hand. And, and I go back, he might have a short list and he should have a short list.
Mm-hmm.
But they would have already known that who was on his short list when they did the original interview.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to find that out in quick order.
Right.
Now, from what I understand, they've had some of these candidates for both positions interacting with each other.
Interesting.
Okay. Sort of behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
That's been told to me a couple times. Has it been verified by the powers that be? No. And they may never verify it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I always thought that myself anyway. Then you got another connection. I've been told, it's not 100% certain, but I'll say it's 90%, that Ryan Poles has Bob Lamont as an agent, who is Andy Reid's agent. He's not a player agent. He's strictly a coach's front office agent and one of the best
mm-hmm.
in that area. And so I'm trying to find out if Quinn and or Caldwell have Lamont as an agent.
Mm-hmm. That would be fascinating to find out.
Because then you're going to have a connection there between the groupings of people.
Mm-hmm. Aaron Curran has made me aware of a report by Matt Spiegel of 670 The Score saying George McCaskey is going to let his new football boss pick the head coach. Ryan Poles is not going to be railroaded into an arranged marriage with the elder statesman like Ryan Pace was with John Fox. If Poles wants Jim Caldwell, he will have chosen him. And that to me is music to my ears. It should not be, in my opinion, a prearranged marriage. It should be.
No, I agree with him that. And Speaks and I were texting back and forth earlier, a couple hours ago.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, when I got home from the store, like I said, I'm out of the grocery store when all hell breaks loose, and I didn't even have my phone with me. I get in the car. I'm only in the store for 30 minutes. I get in the car, and there's news that Poles is a GM, and then I get home, pick up my phone, and there's a text from Speaks. I know that's what they're saying. I don't totally believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not calling anybody a liar. I'm just saying, from what I just said, you've got a guy who's never done it before.
Mm-hmm.
And you need guidance. And that doesn't mean, will he make he could very well make the decision, but, and I don't think George and Ted are going to be that involved in this thing. It's going to be more Bill Polian.
Mm-hmm.
Bill's going to say, Ryan, this guy's your best guy, and this is why. And, he's going to go with his gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But, my original thought was, could Bieniemy all of a sudden become a candidate? And, he wasn't even on the original list. So I just, and again, they would have known who his short list is when they had the original conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, they're not going to force a guy down his throat because they're letting him have the conversations with these guys. And then he's going to have to feel comfortable. But I think it's more like feel comfortable with one of the guys we think you should hire. You follow what I'm saying there?
Yeah, I follow it, and frankly, it's upsetting me. Why?
Hold on.
Why hire a guy who is not going to be allowed to make all the ultimate decisions? Why are you going to hire another guy that you're going to put training wheels on? That to me is ludicrousy. You should then, if you're not going to give him full powers, you should then hire somebody who is capable of making full powers. That to me is just. It's mind-boggling to me.
Okay. First of all, you're getting all excited.
I know I am, because it pisses me off.
So calm down. Go get a bourbon or something.
Okay.
Relax, or get a beer back there. And now look at reality. He might be the most, again, finalist for 4 different jobs. He's obviously shown that he has the traits, aptitude, whatever, to be a GM in the league. He still hasn't done it. Okay. And so go to Notre Dame and they elevated Marcus Freeman to head coach, who'd never been a head coach before. He's on the phone with Jim Tressel, who is his mentor and his head coach, all the time.
Mm-hmm.
To talk it, getting advice, getting things. He needs advice.
I don't understand why you would hire somebody who needs advice.
Because you're not hiring them for 1 year. You're hiring him hopefully for the long haul. Jerry was here 9 years. Okay. Nobody's made, Ryan was here 7 years and, just never could get it right. And it's of the utmost importance that you get the hire right. And he's got to have a feeling that he can work with the guy. They're not going to, in other words, they're not going to throw or shove some candidate down his throat and say, this is the guy you got to do it. They got to be able to work together. He's going to have a say in the process. But is it going to be 100? And I'm guessing here. Nobody's telling me this.
Sure.
I'm just thinking, hey, if it was me, and I've been in the league a long time, I've never hired a head. I've been involved in interviews, but I've never hired a head coach. I want some guidance because I want to make sure I get it right.
So where does the guidance stop? I mean, is he going to get guidance in the draft room from somebody?
No. He's been involved in that. He's been a director of player personnel. That's a whole different ballgame, Aldo. That's scouting. That's his expertise.
Okay.
Here he's doing something that he hasn't done. It goes as part of the job, yes, but he's still never done it before. Okay, and that doesn't mean he's not qualified to do it, but it takes time. Like when Jerry came here, he was involved in the coaching hires, very involved. Didn't have final decision, but very involved in the coaching hires of several coaches down at Tampa. He was down at Tampa a long time, and so he had that experience. Ryan Poles doesn't have that experience yet. I'm not saying that he doesn't have the makings of being a great GM, but he still, again, hasn't done it. Same thing in the Giants. Joe Shane, it's his first go around as a GM. Okay, Chris Mara and John Mara are going to have a say in who that coach is. Shane's going to sign off on it, and he's going to be involved in the process. But it's not, I think it's fair to say it's not 100% his decision. Now, will they say it is? Yep. Because, they don't want to go through what you and I are going through right now.
Answer this one from Joe O'Donnell. He says, is McCaskey the one that's going to get him? So
one person, Bill Polian.
Bill Polian is going to then make that recommendation. You should hire this guy.
But and I guarantee you, Polian's going to be asking a lot of the questions. And like I said, these guys have been talking back. Some of these candidates have been talking back and forth. And if one of these guys has, now I was told, one guy told me earlier today, right? If not earlier today, it was right before I came on the air with you, that there could be another veteran candidate that hasn't been named yet. And I said, who? And he goes, well, I can't tell you. And, I don't know if there is or there isn't, but he said, you'd like the name. And I said, as long as it's not Flores. But because that's just the guy I don't want.
Yeah. Seems to me, though, Greg, that, you were against, and maybe still are, the idea of bringing in an executive vice president of operations. And it seems to me that you are making the argument now for an executive vice president of operations, that the Bill Polian role should continue on so that this young GM can get the tutoring that is necessary, because he hasn't made big decisions. Well, he's never drafted anybody. He's never actually.
No, but he, as a director of player personnel, he's heavily involved.
But he hasn't made that decision. So
no, Andy Reid makes the decision. Brett Veach might be the GM. Andy Reid's making the freaking decision. I've been, I've worked with Andy. I've worked with Veach. That's Andy Reid does that because he's got all the clout. But Andy always listens to his lieutenants. And what's unique about Andy Reid is the way Andy scouts, he'll look at a guy and he'll go, this is how I can use this guy. This is how he's going to help us. So I want him on our team because I can do this, and this with him. And especially with the offensive players, because that's his expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's what they go with. And, and he didn't care if somebody else has him, like they took the little running back from LSU a couple of years ago in the first round. Nobody had him going in the first round, and he didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
He knew how he could use him and be an effective player. But that's what's unique to Ryan, I think, is that he's came up in Kansas City under Pioli.
Mm-hmm.
So he's learned the Patriot way, because that's how Pioli did it. Then Dorsey comes in, and Dorsey and Ballard are there. And Veach was there too as an assistant, and then Veach gets elevated. So he's had different bosses,
mm-hmm.
And he had and some different head coaches. But don't forget, and I'll go back to the coaching thing too. The one negative with him, as bright as he is supposed to be, is that he's only been with the one team. So his exposure to a lot of different coaches is minimal. And that's another reason, you can't take away the acumen of his ability to evaluate and his ability to lead, etc. But there's things he's inexperienced at.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at the big picture, and we're hoping that he's here. I'm not paraphrasing here, and I'm saying this is what Ted Phillips and George McCaskey and Polian are thinking. We're hoping he's here 10, 12, 13 years. He's 36 years old. Maybe he's going to be here for 20.
Yeah.
If he does the right job. Well, you go down the road and he's going to have all that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, he's going to have this initial hire. He's going to need some help because he hasn't done it yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all I'm saying. Now you can get hot. That's just my opinion. And maybe you're right. But I'm sticking to my opinion.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. People want your opinion on Champ Kelly. Does he stay on with Poles as assistant general manager, or
that's an interesting question, and I don't have the answer. Generally speaking, first of all, is there a pre-existing relationship between Ryan Poles and Champ Kelly?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we don't know that. Like I said, everybody. When you're on the road with people, you get to know them. You basically, come up with an opinion. But he's got. I can tell you right now, he's got full authority to do whatever the hell he wants with that personnel department, right off the bat. Now, I'm going to say that between now and the draft, it's pretty much going to stay status quo. That's usually what happens when you hire a GM mid-year, and the changes are made after the draft.
Which is, this draft department, Mark Sadowski and all of those people, they've been preparing for this draft. They have not stopped working during this transition period. And so their input, their knowledge, their plan is tantamount to having a successful draft this upcoming April, isn't it?
Well, these guys, look at it this way, although these guys are all auditioning right now.
Gotcha.
To stay on board.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also guarantee you that just like Ryan Poles had a short list of coaches when he went through the interview list, he had a short list of director of player personnel, director of pro scouting, director of college scouting, maybe even some college scouts that he wanted to bring in. But he's not going to make any changes until he's going to give these guys a fair shot.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you a perfect example. I keep using Ballard, but he's a good example on this.
Okay.
He came in at the same time, got the job, 6-7 years ago with the Colts. He made no changes after the draft.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed status quo. Why? Because they he saw they're a pretty good group. He changed some titles around.
Okay.
And so, but he kept the group, and he still got most of that group. Now he brought in some upper level guys, but the scouting staff as a whole, he kept intact. But he brought in his own director of player personnel, and like brought in Morocco as director of college scouting, and Dodds as director of player personnel, and Rex Hogan, because he knew those guys, you could trust those guys, but the scouting staff remained the same. So in saying that, guys like Mark Sadowski, who I love and is a great guy, Champ Kelly, and those guys, they know that they could be out the door come the day after the draft.
Right.
Which
is what Pace did in his first year. He cleared out most of the draft room, not everybody, but he made some changes the day after his first draft with the Chicago Bears.
Right. And that is generally par for the course in every scouting department across the league when you get a new administration coming in.
Mule asked, is there any way we're going to find out how Poles graded out Fields and Jenkins? I don't think so, is the answer, but I think it is interesting to, I'd love your opinion on this. When they're interviewing these candidates, when they interviewed Poles, did they say, can I see your scouting report on Justin Fields? Can they do that? Would they do that?
Yeah. You can do that. I mean, well, first of all, they're going to want to know what he thinks of him.
Yeah.
What'd you think of him coming out? I mean, that's an important part. They drafted, they traded up, gave up a first round pick. What do you think of this guy?
Yeah, and I'd like to see it on
this way. If he said he didn't want him, he wouldn't be sitting in that chair right now.
Yep.
He wouldn't have got the job.
I agree with that.
That's part of the interview process is you're going over the team.
Yeah.
So if Ryan was smart, he would have grabbed the notebook. The pro scouting department puts a notebook together on each week's opponent.
Okay.
Go through the personnel, tendencies, all that stuff. And if he was smart, he read that thing cover to cover and knew the personnel, the guys that he didn't know.
Right.
He got up to date on, and he did the same thing with Minnesota, did the same thing with the New York Giants. Because it knowing that team who's interviewing you is of the utmost importance, because you're going to be making the decisions going forward, what you're doing with that team. And his most important job, everybody says the hiring the coach. No, it's really getting the right players for the coach.
Right. Exactly. That is so cool.
It wouldn't shock me if he brings in another cap guy. Wouldn't shock, and it wouldn't shock me if he changes, all the decision makers in the player personnel department. Only because, and some of those guys are really worthy guys, but you know what? They when you sign up, that's what your longevity is as good as the guy who works for it. You work for. And that's the same with an assistant coach.
Yeah. Alan wants to know your opinion on what's the more important role, the general manager or the head coach?
They're both important. The GM is more the face of the franchise in the off season. And the coach is the face of the franchise once training camp starts until the season ends. And if you notice, you don't see the GM too often with any team during the season, unless something happens. And unless you're Dallas and Jerry Jones is always around because he's the GM and chief cook and bottle washer and everything else. But
that's right.
He's going to let known what he wants people to know. So, but most GMs just stay in the background during the course of the season. And once the season's over, that they open up.
Factor wants to know if you've picked up on anything regarding polls, drafts, and scouts. Anything that you've learned from his.
No, I mean, he didn't have final say, just like I didn't have final say.
Mhm.
I had a very strong say. Jerry, well, put it this way: we had, when we were here, we had a hot list, and okay, we had a list of guys. We want somebody from this group of guys in the first round, somebody from this group of guys in the second round, somebody from this group of guys in the third round. We have that all mapped out going into the draft. That's all part of it. Now, if you're lucky, when you get to the third round, there's still one of those guys you wanted in the second round. And that makes that third round pick real easy. So, but in Kansas City, putting the board together is where everybody gets their say. And that's when you put your plan together for the draft.
Mm-hmm.
The decision maker in most cases makes the final decision on draft day, but you've made all these decisions. If you're making these decisions while you're on the clock, you're in trouble. You've got to think it out. It's rehearsed, well rehearsed before you go into the draft. And when you get to day 3, it becomes a scouts draft, where the scouts are a lot more involved, because that's really their guys. A lot of times the decision makers haven't seen some of those guys.
Yeah, I love it after the draft where they bring in some of these area scouts to talk about those late round draft picks, because those are the guys who have spent the most time, scouting those guys, evaluating those guys.
Right.
Big hot topic in the chat room and, of course, throughout all of social media is the future of Sean Payton. He has informed the Saints that he's stepping away. And so, of course, people want to know, hey, do you think he might be interested in coming to Chicago Bears? Your thoughts?
Well, number one, he's under contract for 3 more years. So if he all of a sudden said, well, I want to go coach the Bears, Bears don't have the draft capital to give to New Orleans, to get Sean Payton's name on a contract. I think that Sean's going to take the year off, have some fun. It's not like he needs the money. And then next year he's going to have his pick, and trust me, they're not going to pick him. He's going to pick them, regardless of what the rules are of interviews and who you got to interview, etc. Right. He's still going to say, I want to go there.
Yep. You know what? Just my opinion here regarding the Rooney.
Let me just interrupt.
Please.
They're still going to have to pay because he's under contract, even though he's not working. They're still going to have to give something to New Orleans a year from now.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, yeah. For 3 years, they're going to have to give it to him.
Wow. I was thinking about the Rooney Rule, which is a rule that I totally support. But there are some exceptions. There should be, in my mind, some exceptions. For instance, if you're going to hire a Sean Payton, I mean, why go through this process of having to interview anyone else, regardless of color? Because the guy has proven himself to be a guy, if he wants to come to work here, situation's over. Search is over. Stop him and welcome him in.
I agree with you. In fact, I think that, the Rooney Rule, they changed it where you have to interview 2 people for 2 minorities for each major position. And my question is, well, what if I interview Brian Flores, who's obviously an African-American candidate? I like him. I know right at the first interview, that's the guy I want. I don't even want to talk to anybody else. So I got to talk to another minority candidate. I think that's absurd. The whole purpose of the rule is to get minority candidates the opportunity to get these high-level jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to hire a minority candidate, then why do you got to, and you've made up your mind, why do you got to go through the charade of interviewing another one?
Right. And I hate to throw in another exception to the rule that I believe should be implemented is if you're going to hire from within, then I think that should eliminate you from having to hire anyone else. I mean, every organization should be built to have a pipeline of successors for the head coach position, for the
Used
general
to be
manager.
that way.
Right. And so, for instance, with the Saints, there's the rumors that Dennis Allen will be replacing Sean Payton, but they have to go through the process.
They have to go through the same thing was with the Raiders. That guy earned it on the field.
Yeah,
he got him at Bisaccia, got them to the playoffs.
Right.
Okay, and they got to go through the whole interview process. And how about this? He hasn't been fired yet. But they still got to, he's the interim coach. He's still the coach, but they have to go through the process of interviewing at least 2 minority candidates for that position. And Mike Mayock's been let go too. So it's the same thing there. Like Dwayne Joseph, his name's who used to be here with us. Mm-hmm. His name has come up as a GM candidate just recently with some places. And, what if they wanted to just elevate, like you said, elevate Dwayne Joseph to GM? Mm-hmm. He's the director of pro scouting right now. Mm-hmm. And Dwayne is a really good guy. So, they can't do that. They still got to go out and interview other people. I agree with you. I think if you've already got your mind made up on a certain person and he already is a minority candidate, why interview more?
Doesn't make sense to me, but there are smarter people than me running the NFL. So
no, I get it for the fairness. And right now, though, I'll tell you, it's a little disappointing to me. Now, obviously the Bears have hired a minority candidate for the GM position, and I endorse that. But how many coaches are really going to get hired? Mm-hmm. And I think that when you look at the list, they're the best guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
This year, when you look at this year's cycle,
no argument there. Albert Breer tweeted this out several hours ago. I'd love for you to comment on it. He writes in a tweet, so where did the Bears go with their coach hire? New general manager Ryan Poles and Colts defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus, a Bears finalist, have built a relationship the last few years. And Poles is also close with ex-Dolphins coach Brian Flores, both having played football at Boston College. You want to read into anything there?
I did not know that Poles and Eberflus had any kind of relationship. Yeah. And the only reason being is Eberflus never worked Kansas City, and Poles hadn't worked anywhere but Kansas City. Mm-hmm. So where's the relationship come from?
Yeah, that's interesting.
Okay, now and then as far as the Boston College thing, they weren't even close to being in the same class. They're 4 years apart in age. Mm-hmm. So I mean the best case scenario is that Ryan Poles was a freshman and Flores was a senior. And then, they went off, or Flores went off and began his own career. So are they just trying to, tie dots together? Mm-hmm. Or is there something really there? I personally hope that Flores is not the Bears coach. Yeah, that's who it is. I'll support him 100%. But
same here.
Only from little things that I've heard, and I know the GM in Miami really well, Chris Greer. and I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't get along with Chris Greer, you can't get along with anybody.
Yeah.
And to me, and on top of that, he had a different offensive coordinator every year.
Yeah, he did not have good relationship with a lot of his.
And the second last one he had,
Mm-hmm.
Chan Gailey, basically quit.
Mm-hmm.
And so and from what I was told by another coach who interviewed for that role, he called Chan.
Mm-hmm.
And Chan said, "Don't take it."
Is that right?
This guy will drive you nuts.
Oh boy.
And so, when you hear that,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, was his team kind of disciplined? Yeah, but what I've heard is he just tries to, and I can't be 100% correct. The only what I'm hearing is that, he micromanages. And, he's the head coach, but he wants to be the O-line coach and the D-line coach and the linebacker coach and the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator all at once. You can't do that. You've got to hire a staff that you trust and let them do their work.
Right. Exactly. What is the word on Matt Eberflus? I know, with your connections with the Colts and so forth, what do you hear about him as a coach and what style he could bring, what he could bring? Somebody in the chat room, Don Burr, who's a big Lions fan, says the Colts fans are hoping that Eberflus will go to Chicago. Apparently Colts fans are upset with him because of the defense's performance late in the year. What do you hear?
Statistically, their defense has been very, very good.
Outstanding.
Okay. So, and they've had injury problems.
Mm-hmm.
Fans are like that. And the first time they always blame the coach and they never blame the players. But who's playing the frickin' game?
Mm-hmm.
So the coach can lead you to water. Players got to drink the water.
That's right.
Or drink the Gatorade. But with him, with Eberflus, all good things.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how he got to it. It's kind of an interesting story how he got to the Colts. Is going back. Remember, Josh McDaniels was supposed to be the head coach,
mm-hmm.
and because they were in the playoffs, he had agreed to be the head coach, hadn't signed a contract yet because he couldn't by league rule. But Ballard's putting together the staff in conjunction with Josh. And Rod Marinelli, who we all know, was at the time the defensive coordinator with the Cowboys. And Rod ran the same defense as we ran here. That was actually started with Tony Dungy. And, down in Tampa, and Rod is the guy who really recommended Eberflus to Chris. Said, this guy's outstanding, really knows the scheme, teaches well, has a great rapport with the players. He's a leader. He demands accountability from the players. And I think that's important. So, all the right things. And that's why they hired him. And they hired him, it was 2 weeks before the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
But thinking that Josh McDaniels, and they hired about 4 or 5 other coaches, thinking that, and this was all with the blessing of Josh McDaniels.
Okay.
Put these guys under, that's why I have no love. The guy ever gets a head coaching job, I pity the team. You just can't trust them after that.
Interesting.
But so then he has to go out and get another coach, and he gets Frank Reich, and he ends up hitting a home run getting Frank Reich.
He sure did.
But Frank had to come with, we already got these coaches. I hired them, and they're working for you. And, Frank was cool with that.
Frank is the type of coach, from what I've seen and observed in Hard Knocks, that he can adapt to different situations and different people. So
Frank never loses his cool.
Yeah, unlike
never gets overexcited. Chris tells me, he goes, he'll come down from the box after game and he'll be all pissed off and because things didn't go the way he wanted, and he said, Frank's like, calm down, Ballard, I'll take care of it. And that's his demeanor. It's the way he is.
Here's another report from Tom Pelissero. After hiring Poles as GM today, the Bears are working to schedule a second interview with Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn for their head coaching job. Per source, Quinn is one of 3 known finalists, along with Eberflus, who also interviews Wednesday, that is tomorrow, and Jim Caldwell, who we've talked about. Any thoughts on those 3 finalists? And
well, I think that is the 3 finalists. My thinking yesterday, when Ryan got hired, I kind of pushed Eberflus out because there was no connection, where there already was a connection with Morocco. And so, maybe there is a connection. I don't know where it is. I should ask Chris because he would know. But I know they have never worked together. So
gotcha.
Okay, so there might be a connection from being on the road and having some mutual friends and that type of thing, but they have never worked together. But yeah, I think that is a good list. Quinn was a real hot name when he got that job and started off real good at Atlanta. I don't know if and I love Tommy Dimitroff, but I don't know if that was, the greatest personnel department in the world.
Interesting.
And part of that is you got to get the right players. And, that's the GM's job, get the right players. And the coach's job is to coach those players. So I'll tell you why. One of the reasons it kind of solidifies my thought process on that is that here it is a year after he got let go by Atlanta. He got let go mid-season, in the 2020 season. Goes to Dallas as DC, does a really good job turning that D around because they were horrendous a year ago. And this guy's a top candidate all of a sudden. And usually, when you get a guy who was a former head coach, he's got to sit around and wait to get Todd Bowles. And I love Todd Bowles. And that's one of the things I think, if Todd Bowles doesn't get a freaking job, that's a crime.
Yeah.
Now, I saw before we started recording this that the Raiders have requested permission to talk to him tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. Adam Schefter reported that, indeed.
Yeah. And so that's Minnesota, Jacksonville. Now the Raiders that are talking to him. I don't know if Denver had talked to him. And obviously now you've got New Orleans opening up. And there still could be one more.
Speaking of Todd Bowles, I know he's special to you. You really like him and so forth. He is getting a lot of heat, though, for his defensive play calls in Sunday's playoff game, this weekend's playoff game, and calling a
blowout. Yeah, I had a fight with your good friend on DMs after the game.
Who's that? Which one of my good friends? I don't have many, so I should be able to guess.
One of the benefactors of this website.
I see. Oh, I see. So what do you make of that? I mean, obviously, 1 or 2 poor play calls should not define a coach.
It means nothing to me. Okay. You're looking at the whole body of work.
Exactly.
And last year he was, hotter than a hot oven. And people are trying to attach the jet thing to him.
Mm-hmm.
He worked with the worst GM. Wow. He had no freaking players. Hey, that, and I like the guy he was working with. He's a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
He just wasn't qualified for the job.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a few of those guys. They should have jobs. He deserves to be and should be a head coach in this league.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope he is. But I thought 2 days ago Quinn was either going to be in Minnesota or Denver.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hell no, it's probably 50-50 or better that he ends up here, and I see a thing on the screen there, Harbaugh or bust. No, don't let him anywhere near the freaking building.
Why is that? Why is that great?
He's a nut. When he was recruiting one kid, he had a sleepover at his house. Who the hell does that? A grown man. Come on. He just watch him on the sideline. Know what you ought to do a side-by-side. Him and his brother.
Yes.
on the sideline, and watch one versus the other.
Yes.
Now, his brother, I'd hire in a second.
Me too.
But him, I don't want him anywhere near my football team. I think he wears on you. And I think my dog must want to go out. He's coming over here and saying, well, you can't see him. His tail's wagging here.
I see it.
He looks like he's always ready to cry when he's on the sideline.
Mm-hmm. Tony says Pep Hamilton said some bad things about Harbaugh to you, Greg. You're pausing there. Some truth.
Did I ever say that?
No, I think he's speculating.
Oh, no.
He's putting 2 and 2 together, is he?
No, I just, I watch a lot of football.
Mm-hmm.
He did one thing that I thought, I'm big on loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
And his original agent was Jack Betka as coaching agent. And this is when he was at the University of San Diego, and then he goes up to Stanford, and Betka does the contract for all that. Then, he's negotiating with the 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
And now the way I heard it from Jack is that Trent Baalke, who is everyone in the scouting public, number one,
mm-hmm.
who's the GM down in Jacksonville, Baalke says, I can get a deal done if you hire Dunn. And who's a pretty good agent himself, because
Mm-hmm.
Dunn and Baalke were close.
Mm-hmm.
And Harbaugh dumps Jack with, really without even telling him. He kind of finds out, and he ended up having to get paid for it.
Okay.
So he didn't lose a commission, but, that was dirty pool. Well, that's all I need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your loyalty?
Well, back to Jim Caldwell, because he could end up being the leading candidate after Caldwell and Poles talk today. Your thoughts on Jim Caldwell overall?
Very highly respected. I do not know the man.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very highly respected. He's a good coach. Now, I saw some of your stuff about the running game.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it depends where you're at, who your players are, etc. When he was with the Colts, he had some guy named Manning playing quarterback,
mm-hmm.
if I'm not mistaken.
Pretty good guy, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that they're going to lean towards the passing game there.
Mm-hmm. But man,
and then I'm sorry, what?
Just being ranked 32nd, 31.
No,
rushing attempts.
No, I know. But they won with them.
Yeah, they sure did.
Okay, what matters the most?
Super.
And I'm just playing devil's advocate here,
Super Bowl.
Because I like to argue with it.
No, I understand. I love it too.
So he goes to Detroit and he doesn't have a very good roster, yet he wins with them.
Yeah.
And you know what? He might still be the head coach if Bob Quinn hadn't come in and been named the general manager.
Oh, it was horrendous how they treated Jim Caldwell, Bob Quinn, to come in and say, we're not winning enough. And he's coming off.
Yeah, well, guess what? They haven't won since.
Yes, exactly. Quinn left the franchise in much worse shape than when he found it.
I'm going to say this right now on this show. That was one of the all-time worst hires in football. And there's not a scout in the league that wasn't laughing at it.
Really? Wow. Well, that's the fire.
There was like, are you freaking kidding me?
Wow. And
like scouts know scouts. So you want to find out about a guy, call up some other scouts.
J-Rock has a question for you that I think is one we should entertain. Would you like to see Eberflus hired and the Bears go back to that Lovey-style defense that was primarily cover two, but not exclusively cover two, of course?
They play a lot of man. But that defense works. That's what he's running in Indianapolis.
And with Roquan Smith playing in that type of defense, I think it could work amazingly.
Well, Roquan plays really he's the middle linebacker, and that defense he's going to be your will. Okay. Now, if you know in understanding that defense, and I get this from when Lovey came in, you got to be strong up through the middle. So your important parts are your will linebacker, your three technique, and your safeties. And so, I remember Bobby DePaul was our director of pro scouting. He said, we got to have 2 all-pro safeties back there for this to work the way Lovey wants it to work. But we had some pretty good safeties. We had Mike Brown, and then we had a few other guys, but who could play safety in Lovey's scheme. But we didn't have anybody along the line when Lovey came in, and we got rid of everybody but Alex Brown during the offseason. There was Ted Washington and Keith Traylor and Philip Daniels. They were not fits for that scheme. And then we drafted that first draft, Tommy Harris and Tank Johnson. And
great picks.
And brought in Adams.
And
I think we got Adams the second year Lovey was here. But we had to find the guys who could play the defense the way that he wanted. Now, are some of those guys here? Yeah, I think so. I think you could play that here without a problem. But you're going to see Quinn and Khalil Mack now change their position designation from outside linebacker to defensive end. In essence, their edge.
Right.
Because, but you play in that defense because it's a 4-man front. You're playing, you can play more of your base defense than you will if your main or your base front is a 3-4.
One question regarding coaching candidates who still might be in the playoffs. So could we surmise that if the Bears don't hire a coach in the next week or so, it's because they're maybe waiting on one of these coordinators who are in the playoffs? Kevin O'Connell, offensive coordinator with the Rams. He hasn't been mentioned.
He's got interviewed for something or is getting interviewed.
Okay. Trying to think of what other names. Nobody from Cincinnati's defensive coordinator. What's his name?
He got interviewed for the Giants the other day.
Okay, and then you got the Frisco and and people will be upset. But Eric Bieniemy with Kansas City, he might end up being a candidate. He might, he hasn't been mentioned, but Ryan Poles might want to.
No, I mean, you're right. There's an obvious connection there.
Mm-hmm.
They've worked together as long as Bieniemy has been in part of Andy Reid's staff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the connection is there.
Mm-hmm.
And could you say DeMeco Ryans? Well, if Everfluss is your candidate, he's gonna want. I'm kind of just looking at the big picture. He's gonna want somebody who knows that defense.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's been involved in that defense, not just with the Colts, but back down in Dallas too.
Mm-hmm. Now, Bieniemy has not been one of your favorites because you've said on this show before, who calls the plays?
Well, that's right. In my opinion, he's not a true offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Because that's Andy Reid's offense.
Right.
Andy Reid designed it. Andy Reid calls the plays.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the reasons I like Daboll so much.
Mm-hmm.
Daboll designed the offense.
Mm-hmm.
And he runs the offense the way he wants to run the offense. And he's been able to change it a little bit from year to year, depending on, the moving parts. Who's he got out at wide receiver? The passing game has been a lot better since they got Diggs a year ago. And then this last half of the season, Gabriel Davis has really come on strong.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be the number 2 receiver across from Diggs next year. But he had he was a rookie a year ago, hardly played, and there really wasn't. He had a strong preseason, but he wasn't playing that much the first half of the season. But the last half of the season, and then in the playoffs, shit. I mean, he was the best receiver on the field, or maybe the second best receiver on the field, because Tyreek Hill was pretty good. Tyreek Hill is like a foreign object, I think.
Yes.
I've never seen a guy with that kind, and I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen a guy with that kind of speed on the field.
He's amazing. He is amazing. There's no doubt about it.
He is so freaking fast.
Yeah. Mule is concerned about Brian DeBall because he says he's not, he's so, he passes so much in that offense, but isn't that the result?
They ran a lot. They ran a lot the last month.
Yeah, with behind the quarterback primarily, but isn't he calling a lot of passes because of the personnel?
Well, yeah, but the running game in Buffalo improved the last, including the playoffs, the last 5 games of the season. I think it was a weakness. Now, I might have said it on here. I know I've said it on other people. The Bills' best running back would be the number 3 here. The running back group here is far superior to one they have in Buffalo.
So he and Caldwell would probably call more running plays if they were the head coach of the Chicago.
Well, yeah, I mean, your personnel has a little bit to do with it.
Absolutely.
So, and sometimes now look. Here's another thing, because you mentioned in your tweets, Detroit and Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they playing?
Dome stadiums.
Dome stadiums.
Sure.
What's the weather conditions besides perfect?
Better than perfect.
Yeah. So, are you playing in weather at all in the second half of the season unless you're on the road? No. Yeah. So you can gear your offense a little differently when that's your home stadium.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to be clear, when I posted those tweets about the lack of a commitment to the run game by Jim Caldwell, it wasn't a condemnation of him as a head coach. It was just simply a stat that I saw, and it really just made my eyes open. I said, well, let me share this with people. But hopefully, if Caldwell is brought in, hopefully he will be at his best. Before I let you go, I gotta get your thoughts on the preseason games from this weekend. These four
preseason games, playoff games,
postseason games. These 4 games were
unbelievable.
Unbelievable is an understatement. Truly, truly fantastic.
My heart's still hurting from the last one.
Your team, Buffalo, yes.
Oh, that one hurt, and to me that was coaching. And if Leslie Frazier had a chance, he lost it right there.
He may have blown it there, yeah.
Because it wasn't just that last 13, it was the whole second half.
Yeah.
They didn't show up. Now, granted, Buffalo's best cover guy has missed the last half of the season, Tre'Davious White, and he's a Pro Bowl corner. He's one of the best corners in football, and he tore his ACL, and he, done till next year. So they've been playing with a backup, on that one side, and they've played pretty good. They totally shut down New England last week. But Kansas City's a whole different animal, but from Sean McDermott's point of view, I would not have kicked the ball out of the end zone. I would have made them return it. Now, the scary part is that Dave Toub has one of the best return units in football.
Yeah.
But you can, if your kicker's good enough, you can place the kick.
You got to trust your special teamers.
Right. But use up clock.
Mm-hmm.
There was 13 seconds. You would have used up 4 seconds at minimum by kicking that ball, make them return.
Yep.
And then, they were playing prevent, and they got a kicker who can kick at 65 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't play prevent.
I hate prevent defense. I know it's necessary sometimes.
No, I know. Yeah, it's prevent the win.
Exactly.
So what was there was a comment there just about Caldwell. I didn't catch it all.
Let's see. No way a 36-year-old GM is thinking of Jim Caldwell.
I don't necessarily believe that, because there's a lot of experience with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's had success. If he hasn't had success, I'd agree with you, but he's had success. Put it this way: if Caldwell ends up as the head coach, I'm not going to complain.
I will a little.
Okay, that's fine, and you're gonna. But if Quinn ends up, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Denver ends up as a coach, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few I don't want, but if any of those guys get it, that's who do they feel comfortable with? And don't forget, they got to have a plan too. Like Ryan Poles had to have a plan. These guys got to have a plan too.
Yeah.
And part of that plan is what the hell are they going to do with Justin Fields?
Yep, exactly.
And so that's why when you get a guy like Eberflus or with Quinn, who his short list is for offensive coordinator and quarterback coach is extremely important.
Mm-hmm. And keeping that pipeline fed, because you have success with your offensive coordinator, you might lose them a year or two later to a head coaching job. And so you've got to be able to kind of continually replace that offensive coordinator with a like mind. So it's a tricky thing.
Well, if you look at Dan Quinn, did you ever look at his first staff in Atlanta?
I don't remember it. It was loaded.
How about the offensive coordinator was Shanahan?
Yeah.
And the quarterback coach was LaFleur.
Oh, look at that. Wow.
Okay. So, to say that he doesn't have connections to put together a good staff would be absurd.
Agreed.
Because he's already now when he loses Shanahan and he brings in the guy who Sarkisian.
Mm-hmm.
But they had, Sarkisian hadn't really been in the pro game that much, and he just didn't work out that well. And then he brought in a guy who was, I can't think of his last name. He was the head coach after Lovey in Tampa Bay. but I've never been a fan of his. So his guys after that weren't that well. Even though Sarkisian's a pretty good coach, he just, wasn't in tune to the pro game the way he probably should have been to be a coordinator.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the Packers and Aaron Rodgers' performance at Lambeau Field? Was that more Aaron Rodgers just had a bad day, or was it more of D'Amico Ryans just fooling the crap out of him with his defensive calls?
I think all the above.
Yeah. It's usually more than one factor, but definitely, Kurt Warner did a nice job of breaking down Rodgers' performance. It was clear that he made some awful decisions, including late in the game, as opposed to throwing that deep ball to Davante Adams, who was double covered. He had Alan Lazard wide open over the middle. That could have been a huge gainer and would have put them into field goal position. But that was just, I think Rodgers really locked in on Davante Adams in that game, and that really hurt his performance because the defense for the 49ers did a good job double teaming Adams most of the game.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Green Bay's in trouble.
Yeah.
They are right now, as it stands, with Rodgers on the team.
Mm-hmm.
They're almost $50 million over the cap.
Mm-hmm.
So they got to cut a lot of money by the first day of the league year, which is in March. So there's going to be players that are going to be cut loose for salary cap purposes that, are going to become basically street free agents.
I'd love to
see
that.
They're not going to count in the the point cycle for UFAs.
Mm-hmm.
So, for supplemental draft picks. And I'll tell you, you mentioned the one receiver from Green Bay who was wide open.
Lazard.
Yeah, Alan Lazard. Now, he, from a testing standpoint, he didn't test that well coming out, and that's one of the reasons why he went as late as he did. But he was at Iowa State extremely productive. Mm-hmm. He's got great hands. He's tall and he's long. Remember I said it was last week or the week before I got one receiver that I'm thinking of to get in free agency?
Yeah, was that him?
He's one of them.
Oh my gosh, I've been thinking the same thing.
And one of the reasons why is you're going to get him at a bargain price.
Yes.
Okay. And he can be your possession receiver. Yep. He's about 6'3", but he's got real long arms, so he can play about 6'5".
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's almost a no-brainer. But
he blocks, he plays special teams. I mean, he's not going to come here and catch 85 passes and 10 touchdowns.
No, but he's not going to have the guy across from him he's got in Green Bay, and he could become a 50, 60, 65 catch receiver.
I love
in
that.
the league. And so, but it's a thought, but the people in Hallis Hall, and now that's going to be Ryan Poles during free agency, Champ, even if Champ Kelly's let go after the draft, he's going to be involved in free agency. So, and I'll tell you, we didn't say it, but what's interesting, not only will Ryan Poles have the scouting reports of the Bear Scouts, he's got Kansas City's too.
Yes.
Okay, so, he knows what those guys think. And that will help him a little bit. He from the standpoint of knowing who can evaluate, who can evaluate, that sometimes takes a couple of years learning your own staff and the strengths and weaknesses of your scouts. He already knows that about the Kansas City staff. So he, that's going to help him. It's like, when Ballard went to the Colts, he had all the stuff that he did himself in Kansas City and what the other guys did, plus the Colts staff.
Yeah, not bad, huh?
Yeah.
Not bad. He's done an excellent job there acquiring talent. Greg, it's been a fabulous, 60, 80 minutes of football talk, and I'm sure we're going to be back here very soon because I think this coaching hire could be days away.
I agree with you. I had a phone call this morning for my little side job, and we were talking about this, and I said I think it's going to be all wrapped up no later than a week from today. And then 2 hours later they have the GM.
How about that?
thing hired on. I wouldn't be a bit surprised that by the weekend, if not sooner, the head coach is hired.
I'd love to see that happen so that we can.
Unless there's some unknown candidate that you got to wait on.
Right. That's my only thinking, that it would take longer, is these 4 teams might have the next head coach. One of those 4 teams might have the next head coach, which is the only reason you would put this thing off any longer than 2, 3, 4 days. So we should.
Yeah, I mean, if it's any of the guys that are so-called finalists right now, you can make a decision fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I think so too. But please, not Jim Colton. I'm just kidding.
No, I look at it. If I had to rank him, out of those 3, I'm going to put him third. But it wouldn't surprise me if he got the job.
Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me if any of them got the job. I just said, I'm just trying to look at it logically and look at and connect the dots. And I just think, when Morocco was eliminated, then in my mind that kind of eliminated Everfluss.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows? I mean, there could be a connection, and we'll see. If it's going to be Bieniemy, I'm going to tell you right now, it's at least 2 weeks away because that team's going to the Super Bowl.
I'm with you 100%.
The Super Bowl is going to be the Rams and the Chiefs.
Mm-hmm. And if it is Bieniemy, that press conference is going to be really important to listen to, because polls will have to convince us as to why Eric Bieniemy, despite the success he's had with the Chiefs, he's going to have to convince us as to why Bieniemy is a true head coaching candidate, given that he doesn't call the plays, given that it's an Andy Reid team, given that the Andy Reid tree has been faltering, the leaves have been falling. So lots of good stuff ahead.
Well, Sean McDermott's an Andy Reid tree guy.
Yeah, that is true. I forgot about him.
And some of the defensive coaches have been great.
Yeah.
But and Peterson won a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But then he kind of
he did a 180.
fell off the cliff. So really it's you can't look at the tree. You got to look at the person. But Peterson, just like Nagy, same with Bieniemy, they weren't primary play callers.
Mm-hmm.
They'd get their chance to, preseason, they'd call the plays, and a game here and a game there during the regular season. Nagy sold, Andy enough that he did the final 3 games of the season and the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't call a very good game in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So, we'll see. But, he just, the scheme itself is one of the best schemes in football.
Yeah.
But you got to have the guy who knows the scheme for it to work, and that's Andy Reid. So unless you hire Andy Reid, that scheme to me it's another scheme.
Maybe Andy will retire early and be hired as an advisor with the Bears. Not going to happen.
No, then he'd have to be, no. Andy will work as long as he wants, and then, he could retire now. I mean, he's having fun.
After he won that first Super Bowl with Mahomes, he was asked about retiring. He goes, well, I was actually thinking about it, but now that I got this guy, I ain't going nowhere.
I wonder what he thinks of Josh Allen.
Yeah.
To me, that guy's amazing.
He really is. I
mean, can I know we're going overtime, so what?
All right.
Those 2 are going to be battling for at least the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And they're still young.
Yeah.
They both signed extensions for $1 gazillion.
Mm-hmm.
But can you imagine what the next one's going to look like?
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Oh my God.
And the other thing about Josh Allen is clearly the Chiefs have more offensive weapons for Mahomes. Once the Bills get some more offensive weapons for Allen, then I think it could be a seesaw. 1 year Allen's going to win it, and 1 year Mahomes is going to win it. It's going to be much more thrilling than the Manning Brady thing, which Brady dominated because he was surrounded by just an overall better team.
I don't know if I agree with you on the weapons. Buffalo's got some pretty damn good weapons. I think their running game needs to get better.
Right. Okay.
Their receivers are damn good now.
Mm-hmm.
And Gabriel Davis, 9 catches and 4 touchdowns in that playoff game.
Wow, what a fabulous game for that.
And that last, did you see the movie Put on the Corner when they showed the far shot? I mean, that guy's still looking for his job.
That was outstanding. That was outstanding.
Yeah, so they don't have that explosive guy. Now, the little receiver, McKenzie, he's pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
And on most teams, he'd be the fastest guy, but he ain't Tyreek Hill fast, but nobody is. Nope. I've never seen anybody that fast on a football field.
It's amazing.
He makes people look like they're standing still. Yes. On that one play, he goes down. The Buffalo defenders are in pursuit, and they just goes by them like they're standing still.
Despite the fact that the defenders had the angle on him.
Yeah, he outruns angles.
Yes, he does. It was beautiful to watch.
I guarantee you, he's like a 10-200 meters with his uniform on.
Wow.
I mean, he can fly.
That is amazing. Well, maybe the Bears will be getting some guys like that under the stewardship of Ryan Poles. I got to get used to that name, Ryan Poles, because you want to say Ryan Pace. It's
who was it? Greenberg. Said, well, they don't even have to change the nameplate on the door. They just got Ryan P.
That's right. So, is there a head coaching candidate out there, Matt N? I mean, then maybe they are a cheap team. I'm not just kidding. By the way, I had that argument yesterday on social media. The Bears are not a cheap team, despite the fact that they offered Olin Cruz $15. That was an anomaly. They pay as much for players as any other NFL team and almost as much for head coaches. So please.
No, I want to talk about that just for a second.
Please.
Before we go. And I got my own take. I had a text conversation with Olin about it. He doesn't agree with me, but he's pissed off. He's still pissed off.
Yeah, he tweeted about it today. Still,
I know. Oh, well, yeah. Today he said, "Hold your ground, man." and did you see what I tweeted after that?
Oh, I missed it.
I said they offered him $25 because he's got more clout. So
I love it. You got to bring.
I tweeted that back to Olin, but my take is that stuff like that. You're going to hire a part-time guy to work the line. George doesn't even know about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
That's football operation. That was Ryan Pace, Matt Nagy, Harry.
Yeah,
and Harry's the guy. And I might be a little off on this, but I'm pretty sure Harry wanted Olin to be the assistant O-line coach, but Olin didn't want to commit to that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, and part of the reason is sons playing football. How about this? Got 2 sons. Next fall, he'll have 2 sons on scholarship at Illinois playing football.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
One was a freshman this year. The other one played at Loyola Academy and got a scholarship to, football scholarship down to Illinois for next year. So he'll be enrolling in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
So he wants to watch his kids grow up and play, and he's got enough money that he doesn't have to do that. And when you're going to commit to coaching, you're committing to 14, 15 hours a day for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
So he was more than willing to say, okay, yeah, I'll work with him in practice and go to training camp, but that's all I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
George isn't going to know that.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not like, do we got your approval to, that was Ryan Pace.
Yeah. He was
and
made that call. Yeah.
It was disgraceful as far as I can see that they would even, I guarantee you, Harry, I've known Harry a long time. Harry had to be embarrassed as hell.
Mm-hmm.
But in the text conversation I had with Olin is that, I said, I personally watching that, I don't think George ever knew. Now he might have found out when you went on the radio, but still I said the PR people with the Bears should have anticipated that was coming up in the press conference and prepped George on it. So he had at least an intelligent answer.
I totally agree. That is a Bears PR error, first and foremost. Absolutely.
But, and that's what I tried to explain to Olin, but he really didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, he is not, he and George McCaskey are not going to go to the firearms squad.
Shooting range. Now it's George is going to have to reach out to.
That's the way it should be done.
Olin.
Right. Because George made the mistake of basically calling him a liar. And so George has to take that first step. And I hope that he does, because maintaining a good relationships with former players is important to any organization.
Well, there's a lot of alumni that were PO'd about that.
I bet.
If you follow those guys on Twitter, they were PO'd.
Yeah.
And so, and Olin was, the time I was there, he was the leader of the team. Without question. And so, and he's an all-time great Bear player and deserves to be treated with respect for that. And so I think that somewhere in the near future, George has got to reach out to Olin and make this thing right.
Right. Sam Rush says Harry shouldn't have presented that offer, and George has to do better than calling the man a liar. Shake my head.
Yeah, he's right. And here, I know Harry pretty well. Harry probably said, Olin, I don't even want to show you this.
I got approved for $15 an hour.
and it all makes sense because, Olin said, I'm not welcome in Hallis Hall. So they're not going to ask my opinion, because I wanted to ask him, what do you think of this guy and this guy, from being over, because I don't go over there.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so he goes, and he lives across the street.
Is that right? I didn't.
Yeah. You know where Conway Farms is?
Right, yeah. Sure.
Yeah, he lives in the country club, right on the golf course.
Here's a late breaking news from Tony the Pod Boss saying that there's a report on Twitter that Omar Khan's interview was not for the general manager position. So,
and we kind of got away from that. That's what I wanted. Omar Khan is not a GM candidate. He's an administrator.
Okay. Because he's
and the same with the guy from Cleveland who's probably going to get the GM job, but he's not a GM. He's an administrator. And go back to the press conference. George said, and Ted basically said, he's moving away from some of that. He's going to be involved in that stadium. And that's a full-time job.
Yep. And so Khan would be an ideal replacement for Ted Phillips.
Well, yeah, but now see, here's the thing. Now, my complaint was a football operations guy that was a GM type candidate. Now, Omar, who I've met a few times, and is a good guy. He's not that guy that would get that roster tag or anything like that. He's a pure administrator and a pretty damn good one.
Yeah.
So you'd have him doing that, and then Ryan Poles is going to do the job he's supposed to do. That could work very well. I just didn't want to see a football operations guy who was in essence a general manager, ruling over another general manager who was now, a director of player personnel with a fancy title. That was my complaint. And if you bring in a guy like Omar Khan, then you've got a pretty good situation.
Interesting. All right, it is time to pull the plug on this edition of Greg Gabriel Talks Football.
We're going like an hour and 40 minutes now.
Yeah, overtime checks are
checks in the mail, right? Sure. I won't mention the rest of that phrase, but I will respect you in the morning.
Outstanding work, Greg Gabriel. Your opinion on this is so valued by myself and so many people here at the Barroom Network and our followers. Thank you very much for sharing all of this time for us. We've got more football talk later tonight, and it's going to be a later start for the Dan and Aldo show, about 9 p.m., maybe as early as 8:30. Kind of depends on Dan's schedule. He's covering a basketball game of all things out in his neck of the woods, and as soon as he's done with that, we'll jump on and talk about the latest from Hallis Hall.
And we're not going to do this again until they got a HC, right?
That is correct.
Which might be tonight. I mean, for all we know. I mean.
And if it's tonight, we'll be back here tomorrow. So, Greg, you're the best, the absolute best. I'll talk to you later. And for all of you people following us live, thank you very much for interacting with us. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye, everybody.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.